I'm Sarah Barth, Executive Director of Sempervirens Fund. Thank you for joining us for our Under the Redwoods webinar series, where we explore the beauty, history, science, art, inspiration, whatever we can think of with regard to redwoods. As we've been doing at the beginning of these webinars and much of the work we do now, we like to acknowledge that the lands within which we do our conservation work here in the Santa Cruz Mountains are among the ancestral lands for many indigenous peoples, people who occupied these lands for millennia, stewarded them and cared for them effectively and successfully until they were forcibly displaced from these lands. And so we are grateful to work with their descendants, including the Amamutsa Tribal Band and the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, to help as they work to restore their connection, cultural and their traditional relationship to these magnificent forests. Many of you are familiar with our webinars, but just a reminder that you can ask questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen or via the chat, and we will try to get as many of them answered as we can during the webinar, and also we often try to answer them afterwards if we can't do it live time. We are recording this webinar and we'll be posting it on our website afterwards. So if you miss it or you want to share it with other people, you'll have that chance. Many of you have joined us for many of these webinars. This is our 11th one this year. This is the end of the series for 2021, but we are excited and gearing up for a new series starting in January of 2022. The next one, or the first one for 2022, is going to be really interesting. I'm really curious about it, and it involves the connections between forests and human health, and specifically it's about forest bathing. So I really invite you to check that out at the beginning of the new year. Before we get started with our talk, I just want to reflect on a few things. It's really been an important moment for forests at the local level, state and national and international level because of some things that have been happening. Locally, I think what's happened that's most important is that we've had some significant rain, and the risk of wildfire, I think for now in this region, is gone. That's great for our local forests. At the state and federal level, we've seen some policies and some funding put into place that are going to be really important, in particular at the federal level, the Replant Act, which we may talk more about later in this discussion, that is about investing in reforestation post-fire in particular. And that is good for forests in our country. And it really is part and parcel of what's been happening at the international level with the discussions that have just wrapped up in Glasgow around climate change, where forest and forestry were an important part of the conversation. And while there are some debates about whether that recent international forum went far enough to save us from the threats of climate change, I think it was very heartening for those of us who care about forests to see forests recognized as a key part of the solution to the climate change threat, and to understand how at risk our forests are if we don't take action. So a lot happening in the forestry arena, and that's great. These are steps that are worth celebrating. Some of them are long overdue policy steps, but they are happening. One of the other things that I was really heartened about, particularly in terms of the international conversation, was seeing the voices of Indigenous people, I think, elevated in a way that they haven't always been. And in particular, reminding all of us that the link between nature and people is inextricable, and that people are part of nature. They are not two separate things. It is not people and nature. It's really nature, and humans are a part of it. And that mindset, that connection between people and nature, I can't think of an organization that has done more to help advance that concept of the importance of people being in nature, reconnecting with nature, than our guests here today, REI. And so I'm especially pleased that we're going to be talking today about their Opt Outside movement. and all that that multi-year campaign has done to help get more people out and enjoying nature and seeing themselves as a part of it. So let me move on to our speaker. We're so fortunate to be joined today by Vivienne Long. She is the head of marketing for REI, based out of their national headquarters in Seattle. And she's going to be joining us today to talk about the Opt Outside movement, as well as the partnership that we and others have shared with REI. I will say locally and nationally, REI has been an incredibly important and deep partner to Sempervirens Fund. I know that we are not alone in that regard, that many conservation organizations have benefited from REI's support, and that extends far beyond fiscal support. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that in the course of this conversation. So with that, welcome, Vivienne.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. So why don't we just dive right into it? Tell us a bit about the Opt Outside campaign or movement, if you will, and why that's relevant to this audience, and maybe a bit about the history, how it came about.
Yes, definitely, Sarah. Well, it's a really appropriate time as we head toward Thanksgiving and the holidays later this next couple of weeks. Really, the Opt Outside, hashtag Opt Outside, really is about celebrating the power of the outdoors. And you spoke about that, just the importance of people in nature. It's something that is very true about REI, and our mission really is to inspire and enable people to spend time outside. So, and it was interesting, in 2015, which is the inaugural year of Opt Outside, really it was born out of a desire to sort of reject mass consumption, get people up and out of the house, and less around shopping and more around spending time outside. And just really started with our employees and really making sure that they were not subjected to the chaos of Black Friday. And as you know, in the last few years, it's just gotten bigger and bigger and earlier, and just has really been all-consuming. And so not to subject our employees to the chaos of Black Friday, we decided to close our stores, pay our people to really embrace the mission and spend time outside with their families, with their friends, and participating in all the benefits of being outside, physical, mental, all the wonderful aspects. So, I think we were really surprised that a single moment, it just resonated. I don't think anyone really realized it was so core to what we believe and our everything we do, but for it to go so viral so fast, and so many people signed up. In 2015, we had 1.4 million people pledge support of opting out and not shopping on Black Friday and spending time outside. So it was wonderful to see that become really a national movement. So it may be worthwhile maybe to show the video, and then I'd love to come back and talk a little bit about where Opt Outside has moved each year. We've built on it. Yep. And this year in particular has a particular significance, so I want to also talk a little bit about that. But maybe just to remind everyone a little bit of the very first Opt Outside, let's run the video.
Another Black Friday has arrived.
Retailers opening their doors earlier this year. Erupting when someone tried to cut the
Push one, it was a chaotic scene.
taking a stand against the Black Friday frenzy. A major retailer is refusing to open on Black Friday this year.
REI.
Global retailer REI.
All of its locations will be closed on Black Friday.
And it won't be processing any sales online
It will pay employees to take Black Friday off.
to spend time outdoors.
This Black Friday, we're closing all 143 of our stores. We'd rather be in the mountains than in the aisles. Join us on November 27th at Opting Outside.
More retailers are joining REI, deciding to close their doors on Black Friday.
So wonderful to see that. I have to say, I get goosebumps every time I see it. Just, I think, a wonderful encapsulation of how much nature resonates with people. And I think that's been timeless. And 7 years later, I think it's only grown, the love of the outdoors and understanding how important it is to protect it. You asked me, Sarah, around what's happened and how it's evolved.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. Every year we've taken the concept of Opt Outside and built on it. So, in the first year, it was really just about a movement that started internally, and then we found other retailers and other organizations joining us. In the second year, we actually made a call to action, and we talked about, our campaign was, "Will you go out with us?" And we asked more organizations, more people to join us. And in fact, about 275 national, local organizations that added to and stepped up in the second year. So in total, 6 million people pledged support, and nearly 700 organizations. So we had almost 500 joined us the first year, and then 275 joined us the second year. So all people and organizations now participating in Opt Outside. But that's just the starting point. In year 3, we actually launched an experiential search engine because we wanted to inspire people. And so it was fueled with user-generated content and from Instagram and an organization called Adventure Projects, which aggregates information from people who visit different outdoor sites. And 8 million people that year participated in that user-generated content and pledged to support Opt Outside, which is, again, just wonderful. Every year it grew. 2018, more retailers joined us. I think you started to see very large organizations starting to close on Black Friday. So it was really great to see. And then REI, we decided to partner with University of Washington, which is in our backyard, and launched a study called Nature for Health. And so you talked a little bit about this, how important it is. And so that initiative really just spotlighted and had data to show how time outside, even as little as 5 minutes, makes a difference in the health and well-being of people. So that takes us to the first few years, but then in the last 2 to 3 years, in 2019, we decided that spending outside wasn't enough, as important as it was. And we asked our employees, all of our employees, as well as our members. And at that point, we were close to 18, 19 million members in the US, to think of Opt Outside as an opportunity not only to get outside, but to treat it as a nationwide day of service. So we called it Opt to Act. So the opportunity to actually start to address climate change, and whether it was participating in stewardship and cleanups, in recycling plastics, and starting the habit, a year-long habit of doing things that would help fight climate change and keep and protect the environment and the outdoors. So that was 2018. 2020, as you all know, was a crazy year. Numerous challenges between the global pandemic, the civil unrest, the elections that year, very contentious, and then of course the wildfires, which have gotten worse, every year. And 2020 definitely was significant, particularly in the Bay Area. And that year, I think it was really just closing and giving people the moment to pause and reground the outdoors. And I think people really realized that one of the few things you can do that was safe in the COVID environment was to spend time outside. And then this year, so in year 7 in 2021, we think about Opt Outside as really the opportunity to call the entire community, our members, our employees, our community partners like yourself, our vendor partners, to come together and really build an outdoor and equitable outdoors. I think there's increasing understanding that the outdoors is not for everyone, and that we want to create a welcoming environment where it's safe, and invite all members of the community, and particularly our BIPOC community, to participate in the outdoors. And so this year in particular, we have launched a public charity and highlighted the initial grantees who are people and organizations making a difference in the outdoors, and in particularly in creating that equitable, just outdoors. So a lot more that we can talk about there, but just maybe worth showing the video of how Opt Outside, how we brought Opt Outside to life this year.
Great.
Let's imagine what outside can be.
The outdoors hasn't always been an inviting place.
Feeling like sometimes the only one that's like me.
Imagine an outside that had no limits and welcomed everyone.
Outside is home.
It's musical.
Together, we can create an outside with space for everyone.
So inclusivity has always been an important part of REI and our philanthropy and our advocacy, but it particularly came, I think, to the forefront even more so after the death of George Floyd. And so this year we really are about commemorating and building on a more inclusive culture. And we'll just really invite folks to look into the REI Cooperative Action Fund, which we just launched about within the last month. And it's an opportunity for those who share in the vision for an equitable outdoors and in fighting climate change to join us and be able to donate and support grantees. So grantees, I just want to mention a few, particularly in the Bay Area. Some of the inaugural grantees: San Francisco Park Alliance, UCSF Center for Nature and Health, Friends of the LA River, a little further down south, but are some of the organizations that will be grantees for the fund in this first year.
It's really exciting, and I think watching how it has evolved is inspirational, really inspirational. And just as somebody who has, both as a person who loves the outdoors, a person who has children, I think the Opt Outside effort has really, at least given my family a moment to take a breather in the midst of all the hurly-burly of the holidays and the consumerism that's surrounding us, and to get out and enjoy, and as you said, reconnect and get regrounded. So I know for my family, it's been great, and it's really amazing to see how it has taken off. I guess I shouldn't be surprised when I think about how much people, when they do connect with nature, get out of it, but it's still really inspiring. I wonder, I'm so interested in the topic of what it's focused on this year, this issue of equity and access. And also, perhaps before getting into that, maybe tell our audience a bit about what distinguishes REI, what it means that you're a co-op versus, just a standard retail outfit, and how it is that you engage in these kinds of activities that may not be obvious to people about why REI takes on some of these kinds of efforts.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Sarah. I think most people don't, we sell and offer really great products and services, particularly gear for folks getting outdoors. I don't think people realize that we are a cooperative. So a cooperative has a quadruple bottom line, and really thinks about employees, members, as well as society, what we can do for society, in addition to the business and serving customers. So, REI really started in 1938, around 23 friends. So the concept of a cooperative really, came out of 23 friends that came together to buy a pickaxe, because they loved being outdoors, and at the time was really expensive.
Yeah.
To have an ice axe instead of a pickaxe, but an ice axe, so they could climb. Really 23 friends became now what is almost close to 20 million members who love the outdoors and are looking for opportunities to share in that love of the outdoors. So beyond, the gear and the expertise and the experiences, a big part of REI is more on that societal piece, the impact that we can have in communities at the national level as well as the local levels, and particularly in communities. And we think a big part of what we do is not only providing great products and services, but really in helping the fight for life outside. And as you know, there's a lot of things that pull at us to stay inside. Yeah. Especially with technology, and certainly with COVID, did not help. So we think a lot about climate change and the intersection with equity. And so a lot of what we do beyond finding the best products, gear and apparel, and helping people in activities like run, cycle, and camp and hike, is to invest in philanthropy and advocacy. And as I mentioned, the REI Cooperative Action Fund was really the opportunity where we were already taking a percentage of our, our revenue, our earnings, to give back to the community. But we thought we want to be able to open that up and really invite the broader community to join us. So that has been really an important part of addressing the lack of access to nature, and creating that just and equitable outdoors. The other area besides philanthropy is advocacy. So we do get involved in public policy, and have a really great organization that that reviews and influences legislation. So we wanted to, again, with the idea of a cooperative, to really draw on the broader community, our employees, the members, the community partners, and our vendor partners. we created earlier this year what we call the REI Cooperative Action Network. And that is just an opportunity for people to participate in influencing legislation. And you mentioned the Replant Act, and in fact was the inaugural issue. So essentially, it's a really easy way. Folks go online, they can find us. It's an easy way to keep track of legislation and be able to email your congressman and to voice, to share a voice in the outdoors and protecting the outdoors. So really happy to see that signed just in the last week. It's something that we believe we had a small hand in really being able to support that, as I know Sempervirens did as well.
Yeah, well, I know the way the partnership locally has played out for us with REI is you have been generous supporters of ours, financially, but it's far more than that. Not only have you helped with things like advocacy efforts, but more locally, you've really helped us educate and amplify local audiences. So we've hosted events at some of your stores where we've invited our supporters, and you've invited your members to learn about redwoods or learn about forests more generally. One of my earliest projects at Sempervirens was a much smaller, more focused group of people that REI helped us organize, which was a panel discussion with representatives from the tech industry and from the conservation and park world to talk about how tech can help us better conserve our landscapes and better experience our landscapes. So it really, as a partner, you've been really important in helping to amplify and connect different audiences who might not otherwise connect. And I'm curious, you mentioned the Replant Act being one of your priorities. How do you set your priorities in a policy context?
Oh boy, well, we have a really great group of people whose primary job and passion is to prioritize areas like Replant Act around protecting the environment. Also focus on helping people get children education and helping children get outside. Areas like fighting climate change in all different ways. That could be in protecting green spaces, in rewilding areas like that. And then also, I think most recently, a real focus on, even bigger focus on promoting racial equity. So mention the Outdoors for All Act would be one that we also have been highlighting for our members in our community. So those are, some of the areas, but they're largely around, there are many things that we're, that have societal impact, but the two that we've really prioritized are ways to help protect the outdoors, stewardship, fighting climate change, and then racial equity, diversity, inclusion in the outdoors.
One other area that I've seen you all really engage in is around the effort to get people to recreate responsibly, right? That once you get out there, to do so in ways that are light on the land, leave only footprints kind of ethic, but the modern version of that. Can you tell me anything more about what you all either have done or might be doing around that?
Yeah, Sarah, that's a really great point. And I think during coronavirus and COVID, a lot of people realized going outside was one of the few areas that was safe, but safe also from not only a COVID standpoint, but also really important for health and wellness, and especially during such a stressful time. So REI was one of the founding partners of a coalition of organizations nationally and locally called Recreate Responsibly Coalition. And as you know, one of the leaders as well of the California chapter, which is a big chapter, given how many people enjoy the outdoors. So our role was really convening and educating stakeholders on the importance of recreating responsibly. So the focus was on how do we amplify messaging and just help people understand what is recreating responsibly.
Yeah, yeah.
What does that look like? And so there's a set of principles that and created posters and materials to help people understand areas like, for example, know before you go, know the area you're trying to go, areas like leave no trace. So just really good principles, and then really importantly, respecting others. So, especially as it got more crowded, respect for all the people who wanted to participate in the outdoors was really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to be, it's something that all of us in the conservation world struggle with, is you want more people to enjoy these places, and you want people to be able to experience them and enjoy them themselves without, maybe not without huge crowds, and not in a way that's loving a place to death. So it's a tricky balance. And so we've been really pleased to be part of this effort. I think it's really, really quite important. Going back to this theme has been weaving in and out throughout, so I want to go back to it. Thinking about part of recreating responsibly being inclusive, welcoming, helping everybody to feel comfortable. And this is the theme of Opt Outside this year. I'm just curious what you all are seeing, whether you see it in your membership demographics, or I don't know that you have a way to track it, but are you seeing change happening, or do you think we're still so early in this effort to make the outdoors more welcoming and inclusive that it's too early to see change yet? But I'm just curious, what are you observing? And if you aren't seeing change, do you have any sense for what some of the barriers may be?
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a really deep topic, Sarah. And we could probably talk for days on this, because it's definitely an area that REI has been, particularly in the last year, spending a lot of time thinking about what can we do, what kind of impact can we have. I mean, just to start, I don't think folks realize that there are nearly 100 million Americans who don't live near a park or green space within 10 minutes walking distance of their house.
Yeah.
And so so it's an access issue as much as it also is a welcoming issue. Even with access, people don't necessarily feel comfortable, whether it's safety or even feeling welcome in the outdoors.
Yeah.
That feels more exclusive, and that there's for certain people the outdoors, but not for everyone. So I think that a lot of what we are focused on is, amplifying and helping people understand that there are underserved communities, and that there's a big intersection between climate change and the disproportionate impact on communities of color.
Yeah.
So I think there are great organizations doing great work here. And, we are doing as much as we can to support those organizations to amplify their great work in creating that more accessible, in tearing down those barriers. But I don't think it'll be overnight or fast. And my hope and desire, I think, is that there's going to be more awareness, and that we'll see the efforts, I think the awareness grow, and then more to be done in this area.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of great organizations doing good work here. So just a few that, I mean, there's so many, but there's a few, I think, particularly in the Bay Area, I want to call out. I think, let me see, I wrote down a few, because there are quite a few, but the ones that I wanted to call out that would be worth highlighting. Let's see, I know, let's see, I will come back, because I definitely, oh, here. So groups like Black Girls Run, Outdoor Afro, 510 Hikers, Saved by Nature and Hike Club are a few of the organizations that we partner with and we support, and just doing wonderful work in this space. So
Yeah. Yes, and some of them are organizations that we've partnered with as well. I do think, just as a very old organization that's been involved in the creation of public recreation spaces for a long time, I think we thought we were creating spaces that were accessible and welcoming to all, because they were public parks and they're for the public. And I think it's been an important realization for our organization that isn't enough to just create these places and expect everyone will be able to get to them, or that when they do get to them, that they'll feel comfortable. So that, just using us as a single example, I think there's been a real awakening and desire to listen closely to some of those organizations and voices, community members, to hear what we can do, what others can do to make these places more accessible, more welcoming.
Yeah.
I think it's an essential part of the future of the conservation movement, for a whole lot of reasons, for us to try to get to a place where nature is for all. And
the other piece, Sarah, that I think worth mentioning is, there in many of the public spaces, they have a rich history and a narrative that are sacred and very important to Indigenous people and to different communities of color, and just some of the things that we've been trying to help people understand, that public space still have to respect the lands, and that they can have very deep histories and meaning, and are considered sacred in some cases. So the idea of even the public coming and recreating itself can be problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. We work closely with some tribal folks in our region, and that is an ongoing issue, is trying to find ways to protect these places for their ceremonial sacred purposes. And that doesn't necessarily correlate well with having them be open to everybody, the whole public. So that there are a lot of nuances here, but I'm excited. I'm excited to see those voices included more than I've seen them included in the past. And I think there is a rich history, rich set of cultures, legacies, stories about the way different communities connect to nature, that are yet to be told. So to me, it's a really exciting and invigorating time in the conservation movement to see broader recognition and honoring of the relationships that lots of different people have had with nature, and not just the relationship that, say, the people that Sempervirens have had with nature. So I think it's exciting and important, and I'm so glad having REI help amplify this, raise it to a national audience, provide funding. It's just fantastic. It really helps move things along. So I'm really grateful for what you're doing in this regard.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I completely agree with you. It is exciting, and excited to see what happens, because I do think there's a lot more organizations pulling and people pulling in the direction, and that's how change happens. That's the whole concept of cooperative action.
Yeah. One of the things, thinking about different communities, different groups of people, REI, although you're such a dominant, I think of you as a dominant national retailer, and yet you really have, in my observation, stayed true to having a community focus. And I'm curious why that is, why that works for REI, what you've learned from that.
Yeah, that's it is. I mean, when I think about the work we do in philanthropy and advocacy, the best part is really when we can go beyond even, providing financial support. It's really getting involved in the community. So you talked about before around events and education and stewardship. It's impact at the individual level, at the local level, is really what excites and we're passionate about. So I think community engagement is really partnering with organizations at the local level, and being able to just support the amazing community partners. That's what we like. And so where we can enable organizations to focus on their mission, because we can then add some resources. It's just, I think, very much a part of REI. We as much as we we understand that the local level is really an important part of and being part of the community. We are one of the community. That is, how do we amplify others is a big part of how we think about things. Even to the point, and I'm really excited that we have quite a few stores in California, because we generally like to participate, particularly in the communities around our stores. And with just recently, we opened the store in Santa Cruz, our actually last 2 stores. So we have almost 175 stores around the country. 30 of them are in California, and we tend to be a little bit more Pacific Northwest and West Coast focused. But we just starting to add more stores in the rest of the country. But in California, and particularly the Bay Area, our two most recent is Sunnyvale and in Santa Cruz. And Sunnyvale is actually moving the Mountain View store to Sunnyvale, and then Santa Cruz was a brand new store. And there was just fun to partner, amplify and partner with the organizations that participate. So besides Sempervirens,
yes, I was going to say, we were there this weekend. Yeah. Opened.
Ventana Wilderness Association, the Santa Cruz Mountains Trail Stewardship, and then our running partners, She's Beautiful and Bay Area Run Crew, or some of the organizations that came out, and then the fun guest experience. And I was not able to come out, but my understanding is the U.S. Congressman Jimmy Panetta was out there, and he had a huge participation in the Replant Act.
Yes, yeah, he was the co-sponsor of it, and he's been a champion of conservation, both on land and in the ocean. So it was totally appropriate to have him at an REI event. Yeah. That to me, and I wasn't able to be there either, but hearing from my colleagues who did attend, that totally, to me, was emblematic of what REI brings to a community, right? You were bringing together the different conservation voices, recreation voices, political leadership, and the community. And that's powerful. So we were glad to be a part of it. So I have 2 more questions for you, and then we're going to open it up. My colleague is going to bring to us some of the questions that the audience has raised. First question is just going back to the issue of, what you're seeing in terms of trends in recreation, whether it's equity and access related or not. You've mentioned that opt outside has gotten bigger and bigger, but I'm curious, what are you seeing more broadly? Do you see more people recreating? That's my perception, but I'm just curious if that's what you all see at a national level. Are more people getting outside, not just on, Black Friday, but is this movement having reach beyond that one day? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Sarah. I think we saw, there was definitely continued growth in people participating in outdoors, but I think there was a pretty significant step change with COVID.
Yeah.
I think people who may have, they renewed their passion for the outdoors. I think some folks got so busy with life that, outdoors wasn't as important, and all of a sudden it got elevated as a source of not only being able to physically exercise, right? Because many indoor locations were closed, all the health clubs and ways that so either people going inside their house, but then realizing they're spending 24/7 in their house, and the outdoors is really the natural place to be, especially because of the restorative, reducing anxiety and stress that was being caused by just all of the global pandemic. So we saw a step change, and that has continued. I mean, and we are obviously still very much in COVID, but we have seen that outdoors really resonate. I think what we're also seeing is that folks are not necessarily thinking of the outdoors as the big epic trip, and that folks are understanding that you can participate in the outdoors. We like to say outside, literally every day, and it can be small periods of time as opposed to taking long trips. That there's a benefit to getting outside every day. And the celebration of, besides camping, hiking, which continue to be, really important activities, running and cycling are equally, being in your backyard, going to a local park, those are all really wonderful ways to get outside. So I think it's true for not only for kids to be outside, but definitely true for
everybody,
adults and everybody. That's right.
Yeah. That what you're saying is very consistent with what we're seeing locally, which is high intensification of use of our public lands for recreation. And it doesn't seem to have abated, even though, the world is opening a bit more. We're not post-COVID, but we're in maybe in a different phase. So that's interesting and I think good to hear. And I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning about how few people have access or close proximity to parks. And that's something that Sempervirens has advocated for. We hear often, oh, there's plenty of parks and we can't afford the ones we have. We need to take care of them before we build new parks. And we feel, and we've championed the need to get more places protected, not just rural forest land parks, but, areas along rivers in, urban San Jose or elsewhere that allow people to have that connection to the outside and to nature, and that there are not enough of those places, and that there are communities that are park poor. So I just want to mention how important that is, that we all be mindful of that. Some of us are really fortunate and have, can go to a beautiful redwood park every weekend. A lot of us can't. And so how do we address that? In part, it's going to be about protecting new places, making them accessible. So, all right. Well, my last question for you, and then we'll turn it over to my colleague, is just, can you tell us anything about where you think Opt Outside goes from here? Obviously, we have upcoming next week, that'll be your big moment, but anything else you want to share with us about where it's heading?
Well, at the root of it is just encouraging people to participate in the outdoors, to spend time outdoors, and hopefully participate in the community together. And this idea of together we can do more. So, it's not like I thought we've created something and we're waiting for next year. We start every year and think about what it is. So I would say likely we're going to want to build on some of the work we're doing around racial equity, diversity, inclusion, but more to come. It's our opportunity to reinvent and think about it in a broader way. I'm just excited that people, are participating. It's resonating. And then I just want to thank you and Sempervirens, because we're excited to partner with you around Opt Outside and the photo contest for this in the next few weeks, when Thanksgiving, or next week actually, it's coming up so fast, next week, and seeing all the photos of ways people are getting outside.
Yeah, well, and I'm not supposed to say much, but I can tell our audience that we are working on a partnership that will roll out early next year with an eye towards happening around Earth Day. So
that's right.
Come around that partnership. All right, well, let me turn it over to my colleague, Matt, to share with us the questions that he's been getting.
Thank you. And thank you, Vivienne, so much for sharing the Opt Outside story with us. One thing that has come up is how REI is so sort of embedded in communities. And curious what some of those time-tested truths might be about that sort of approach to be so closely tied to communities over such a long time.
time tested. I mean, at this simplest level, I think when we partner with the community and the nonprofit organizations in the community that are doing good things, that I think it feels so basic, but so important. We don't think of ourselves, as much as we are a retailer for a lot of folks, we see ourselves as like supporting the community. So in essence, that's our time tested is we don't come in and assume that we know what the community needs. The community knows what it needs. What we try to do is amplify the good work that's already happening. So I hope that answers the question. Feels very simple at one level, but it takes time, and relationship building and building over the long term. I think it's important work, and it's not something that I think a traditional retailer necessarily focuses on. For us, because of a cooperative status, that's important to us. Is, are we having impact in the communities? That's around hiring. It's around investing back in the community. 70% of every dollar that we generate from our stores and from our online business goes back into our members, into employees, and to the community. So that's kind of our time tested, I guess, is, I can't say enough about a cooperative and the permission it gives us to do good things and to do, I think, what's right and what long-term serves the community.
One, Matt, if I could interrupt with a sort of follow-on question, I think that what I've seen from my days going back to when I used to work on Capitol Hill and wasn't at Sempervirens Fund, you are part of a larger, a different kind of community, and that is a network of outdoor retailers who care about conservation. And there is a community or collaboration among some of the companies that are in the outdoor industry, outdoor recreation industry space, to come together and be vocal on different kinds of policy issues, whether it's the Replant Act or funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And that's a really different kind of community than local, but it's your community of fellow retailers, most of which are not co-ops, and most of which may not even be B Corps, but nevertheless come together and have, I've seen, become a growing voice for conservation and outdoor recreation in the public policy arena. And I just wondered, if you have any reaction to that or comments you'd want to add about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sarah. I mean, there's so many different ways to define community, and there's the local community, there's nationally, and then definitely within the outdoor industry. So yeah, I would say we participate, and ideally the role that REI likes to play is to convene and bring together different organizations. A simple example would be even just the development of our product impacts. We call them product impact standards, but our standards around just how we make products, or how our vendors make products, and how we can be more sustainable in the way we think about that. And most recently, we've updated in 2020 to also be respectful of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that would be another way, to your point, thinking about community within the outdoor space.
Yeah. Matt, I'm going to take interviewer's prerogative and ask another question, and then I'll yield. I started all of this by talking about the fact that internationally, we've just seen this major forum on climate change. You mentioned climate throughout your remarks. It's clearly a big area of focus for REI. It is a driving motivator for Sempervirens Fund, both because redwoods conserve more carbon than any plant species on the planet. So they're important to dealing with the carbon issues and climate issues, and also because if we don't deal with it, they will not survive into the next generation. But I'm curious how REI is thinking about climate change. What are the biggest areas where you see yourselves as helping play a role? Is it in education, policy, or your own production. What made me think about it and asking you is talking about your standards, and obviously as the buyer of many things, you have some impact on production approaches. So I'm just curious, when you mentioned earlier that climate was a big push for you, what does that look like for REI?
Yeah, so besides philanthropy and investing in organizations that fight climate change, and besides advocacy in supporting legislation that fights climate change, we look internally. We are climate neutral as an organization. So as you think about all of our retail, our stores,
that's amazing.
Our footprint, and then we've made a commitment to cut our carbon footprint in half by 2030. So there's a lot of work to understand what are the things we can do to reduce our footprint. There's the product impact standards. Hopefully we're influencing others in the industry as well.
Yeah.
And I would say the last piece is just that the point around the intersectionality of how can we really look at the communities that are most impacted, and what can we do to help support those communities. So it has a lot of intersectionality with the racial equity, diversity, inclusion work that we're focused on as well.
Yeah, great. All right, Matt, do we have time for one more question? I'm sorry, I hijacked you.
all good and overlapping with questions we've gotten. So thank you for seeing into that crystal ball. One of the other sets of questions we've gotten is around the future of conservation in America. We've talked about climate change, but really the protection of land and forests. Are there things that you think about in your role at REI, or REI thinks about in terms of land conservation, your hopes and dreams for its future?
Oh gosh, I think it's so critical. I mean, I think that is a fundamental part of for a life well lived outside, which is very much of how REI thinks about how important the outdoors is to just a good life and for the well-being of humans. Land conservation has to be part of that, of supporting the outdoors. It's so fundamental. So I think it's very, very much hand in hand with, as we think about what does it mean to steward and to protect the environment. Land conservation is definitely part of it. I am not the expert. I mean, what's wonderful about REI as an organization is we have experts who live and breathe and think about what we can do, not only within our own organization, but then in the broader community, what we can and should be doing in terms of land conservation, environmental impact, in areas like that. So I would probably defer to them to help me understand what are the things that what we can be doing. And there's definitely active conversations all the time. It's one of our priorities from an impact standpoint is to focus on climate change and the areas of climate change like land conservation.
Well, and to think about the thought leadership coming out of REI around things like land conservation, I'll just remind, and many of the audience may already know this, but recall that the head of REI was recruited by President Obama to become the head of the Department of the Interior, which has oversight over all of our country's federal public lands and all of its endangered species and its tribes and a lot of other things. And so that right there, I think, is a real testament to the companies or the co-ops commitment to these issues, real thought leadership on it. Ain't many people get to be Secretary of the Interior. Usually they come out of the US Senate or a gubernatorial position. So that's really a commentary, I think, on this organization's commitment to conservation.
Yeah, I think to just add to that, I mean, we think a lot about the now almost 20 million members, and a big part of what we do is creating awareness and hopefully the appreciation for conservation with our 20 million members. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you to REI for all you've done for us locally for our landscapes locally, for us as recreationalists, and as well at the national level. It's really, you play a critical role, and we are really grateful for it. So, and thank you, Vivienne, for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. And I hope our audience will join us next time, which is next January. So we've got downtime the month of December, but otherwise we're right back into it. And our next webinar is going to be a really unusual one. We're going to be out in the forest doing some forest bathing, which as kind of a hard-bitten New Englander, I have a little raised eyebrow about, but I'm sure I will find it soothing and wonderful. So I hope all of you will join us. And again, Vivienne, and to all of your colleagues at REI, thank you for your contributions in the conservation and public access arena.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Bye, audience.